convener and conduit for research, advocacy, and resources to end sexual and labor exploitation in Metro Atlanta, in Georgia, and beyond. And that beyond means that she's going to help us here in Dallas, Texas today. The organization has 6 strategies designed to help traffic proof vulnerable people, one of which being to train partners. And we are delighted to be a partner agency today. And they share the latest research, practices, tools, and technologies that address human trafficking. For 25 years, Ms. Marshall has worked in the nonprofit and faith sectors, creating programs and opportunities for people of all ages. Most recently, she was an achievement coach working with parents and their children in setting and reaching personal and professional educational goals. She also consulted with the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, Women's and Girls Collaborative, planning and executing programs for women and girls focused on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which is achieving gender equity. Miss Marshall was introduced to human trafficking about 20 years ago as an art therapist for girls residing in Angela's House. Angela's House is one of the first safe houses for sexually exploited girls. She has also consulted with Youth Spark and other youth serving organizations in her time. She received her BA in English from Austin College here in Sherman, Texas, down in Texas. See, I knew there was a reason we enjoyed you. So that's why you're working with us here in Dallas. She's also a graduate of the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and she is a recent graduate of the Islamic Speakers Bureau Leadership Institute. So as you can see, she is well versed and well able to help us out here and share information. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, Ms. Marshall, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jackson, for having me in this space. I am so excited. I do want to thank Coyote for inviting me to come. She sat in on a session with me, and we had an opportunity to dialogue. And later, she just asked if I would be willing to join you all in this space. And I am excited. And I think you get it because Houston is home for me. I put it in the chat. I am no stranger to Dallas. I used to slip away a lot of times up to Dallas from Sherman and to other parts of North Texas. So yes, I feel at home today in this space, and I'm so excited to be able to join you all to begin these types of conversations on how you can become the experts on working to traffic-proof Dallas and the Metroplex of Dallas. So, I did some research before I even, came to this space with you to learn that yes, indeed, like other metropolitan areas, you all are having your share of trafficking instances. And so a lot of times what I tell people is that the only way that we're going to eradicate human trafficking is by us talking about it within our circles of influence, getting down into the trenches and educating our children, and not to make them fearful, but to make them knowledgeable of, how this happens in community. So today, what we're going to do is you're going to learn, see, and do something about both labor and sex trafficking. So the difference with IHTI is that our work doesn't just focus on sex trafficking. We talk about the labor portion of this because a lot of times folks don't understand that, this is happening in their communities through labor, but because you don't know what it looks like, then you don't know what you're seeing. So y'all, yesterday we celebrated reaching 50,000 people in Georgia to teach them about the signs of labor and sex trafficking. And I was so excited to be able to reach that goal. It was a 3-year goal. We had a strategic plan. And, I talk about this as big business. So that's the way I want you to walk away, looking at this as big business and understanding the role of market demand in all forms of trafficking. And then I want you to walk away understanding how to make it unacceptable in Dallas. So I'm not sure in Dallas if the focus is on removing and restoring victims. That could possibly be the case. That a lot of people put the emphasis on making sure that those folk are safe. I get that, but we want to talk about how we can, as communities, come together to address the root of the problem. And that's another place where the big business come in. So it's about the demand. Where does that demand come from? And how we can stop the predators and the traffickers. So, I want to put a pin in this and just talk about this from the standpoint of, it used to be a long time ago, you could go to a restaurant and you could sit down, have a really good meal, like places like Steak and Ale that used to be around, and just different restaurants that I know I went back there. But all of those places that people would go and have a nice steak and, but those who were smokers could just light up a cigarette and just smoke after they finished. But at some point, community said, we no longer want to inhale secondhand smoke. This is endangering our lives. And they created laws around that. And I bet you won't go into a restaurant now and light up a cigarette after you finish because it's against the law and you will be arrested. Well, in the state of Georgia, we have laws around human trafficking. The thing is that they're not, um, no one is holding people accountable with the law. Like the predators and the traffickers, they get a slap on the wrist because a lot of times people can't prove that it's trafficking because it's a dark secret. So what we're saying is that we have to hold, the law accountable for the predators and the traffickers, and they have to be prosecuted and go to jail. So that's one of the ways that we say we end this. The other way is that we're going to show you today how to purchase traffic-free items, because the bottom of it is that we ourselves as consumers we're adding to this. We are guilty of contributing to forced labor. So we'll talk about that as well. So this little circular that you see, it just tells you that at the very base of this is the predator. And if it were not for the predator, then we would not have human trafficking. But the predator and the trafficker work hand in hand. And of course, the victims are the supply. So listen, this is a slide of all of the folk who come to the table with us and say, hey, we join you in wanting to make human trafficking unacceptable. And this is not just Georgia. I mean, you see Coca-Cola, that's in Dallas, right outside of Dallas. You see UPS, you see the Falcons and the NFL. So, you have Dallas teams as well. So that just goes to show you that this is a joint effort. So y'all, I say we have 3 objectives in this deck. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what we want to do. We want to traffic-proof vulnerable people, number 1. We want to demand prevention, number 2. And then we want to talk about changing our own consumer habits. And so with that, we want you to understand what you can do as a consumer. I'm going to now play for you a working, this is what I've labeled it, a working definition of human trafficking. I want you to pay close attention to what you're seeing and hearing.
What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is modern-day slavery. It is the exploitation of a person through force, fraud, or coercion. Human smuggling and human trafficking are different crimes. Human smuggling is the illegal movement of someone across a border. Human trafficking is the illegal exploitation of a person. Human trafficking is about exploitation, not transportation. Human trafficking is a highly profitable crime and a violation of human rights. It occurs in every part of the world, including here in the United States. It happens in our big cities, our suburbs, and even in rural towns. It can happen to anyone. Human trafficking victims can be U.S. citizens or from other countries. Victims can be any age, race, or gender. But one thing they share is that they are vulnerable to being exploited. There are different types of human trafficking, including sex trafficking, forced labor, and domestic servitude. Sex trafficking victims are manipulated or forced against their will to engage in sex acts for money. Sex traffickers might use violence, threats, manipulation, or the promise of love and affection to lure victims. Truck stops, hotel rooms, rest areas, street corners, clubs, private residences. These are just some of the places where victims are forced to sell sex. Any person under the age of 18 involved in a commercial sex act is considered a victim of human trafficking. No exceptions. Forced labor takes on many forms, and it happens here in the US and overseas. Through force, fraud, or coercion, victims are made to work for little or no pay. Very often, these victims are forced to manufacture or grow the products that we use and consume every day. Victims of forced labor can be found in factories, on farms, doing construction work, and more. Victims of domestic servitude are hidden in plain sight, forced to work in homes across the United States. Their traffickers sometimes take their identification papers and travel documents in order to limit their freedom. They are prisoners, working as nannies, maids, or domestic help. Every year in the United States, thousands of human trafficking cases are reported, but many more go unnoticed. That's because human trafficking is a hidden crime. Victims might be afraid to come forward, or we may not recognize the signs, even if it's happening right in front of us. We need to bring this crime out of the shadows. That's why the Department of Homeland Security created the Blue Campaign, to take a stand against modern-day slavery and help combat this heinous crime by raising awareness of human trafficking around the country.
And so the operative word here is around the country. For us here in Atlanta, this has been a huge task, but likewise, I would suggest that it's a huge task there in Dallas. So what we do is we talk about this as a community. Now, I'm not sure how many people are on here with me today, but if someone could put in the chat for me the three ways that they talked about where human trafficking is happening, I would definitely like that classroom participation. So I'm going to go up to the screen and see if anybody is talking to me in the chat to tell me those three ways that you find human trafficking happening. So I'll come back to that at some point. Okay, Latoya is talking to me about it. So Latoya is on the right path, but the three ways that I want you guys to walk away with remembering is that you will find human trafficking under the sex trafficking, the forced labor, and the domestic servitude. So that's the way that you'll find this happening in our communities. So now we're going to talk about labor trafficking, learn something. So on both sides of our deck, you have learn something, see something, do something. So labor trafficking is 80% of human trafficking is labor trafficking. And the ways that you see this happening is right in your community around construction. When you see sites going up, buildings going up, there is an element of trafficking happening, but the thing is that no one is calling it on the carpet, and because they aren't, there are regulations everywhere around trafficking, but if you're not calling it on the carpet, then it goes on and no one addresses it. Hospitality and leisure. When you talk about the nail salons, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we go along, but these are places, y'all, if you see a massage parlor that's open 24 hours a day, there is more than massages going on in that space. So that's something that we should be alerted to. Janitorial services, landscaping, all of these are areas that are labor intense that trafficking is occurring. So listen, as an organization, we focus our time and our energy on talking about kids under the age of 18 because they really can't save themselves. We have to create a space where we are giving the information so that they can be saved. But what we know is that the scope of human trafficking with children involves 152 million of our kids. This is when I say our kids, I'm talking about a generic hour. So all over the world, you're finding these kids involved in labor trafficking. 73 million of these kids were working in hazardous working conditions. And I'll get an opportunity to show you that. 48% were below the age of 12. So we're not talking about like teenagers or young adults. We're talking about kids. And while 58% were boys, we know that girls are involved. It's just that, once again, a hidden crime, little statistics that I can quote for you. Now, I'm not sure if this is happening in Dallas, but this is something we're dealing with here in Metro Atlanta. And that involves teenage boys predominantly recruited for traveling sales. So we have the magazine sales. Typically, you'll see that at like the Walmart parking lots, the Kroger parking lots, anywhere where people are shopping. You'll have these kids who have rehearsed and learned a script, and they will recite that script to you and ask you to help them out. Y'all, I want to just tell you that this is traveling sales. Polaris Project, which is one of our partners, has said that these kids are being trafficked across the country. You'll see this during the summer months, where you'll see them selling magazines and candy. Sometimes they'll say that they're, working to get a scholarship for college, but that's not what's happening. These kids are being trafficked. The other piece we talk about here in Atlanta, and I'm sure you've seen it on the national news with our water boys. These are boys who are selling water on street corners. Now, I'm not talking about the other older boys who are over the age of 18 selling water. What I am talking about or referring to are these kids who are like in middle and high school who are selling water, and they don't have the means to buy the ice chest, or buy the water, but they're on those corners every weekend. So someone is supporting that. That would be the trafficker. So these are the things that we have to address as a community to keep our kids safe. Now, this is something that was startling. 2 years ago, ICI sat with the Georgia Aquarium, and we learned that was slave labor happening in our seafood chain. So now, y'all, I'm going to let you listen to this guy, Ming Mang, talk about his life, and then I'm going to talk about it on the other side of this video.
Cases where people do something to anger the captain, where they fail to perform, they are killed. They're killed and thrown overboard. And then
Phil Roberts is Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch Asia. He estimates that roughly 20% of the fishermen on Thai commercial boats are enslaved, though the Thai government insists those numbers have improved.
American consumers need to be aware that they could be consuming products made with forced labor if they're buying Thai seafood. They're supporting an industry that is still benefiting from the abuse and the exploitation of people who are not free to leave.
Is that similar to the vessels they used to fish on? Min Nang is a former slave. He says he spent more than 5 years trapped and abused on Thai fishing boats. We met him in Yangon, Myanmar.
Whenever we were in port, they shackled me. They unlocked me only when the boat left. When the boat returned to shore, I had to unload the fish, and I got chained again on the front end of the boat, whether it was sunny or rainy.
Mang shows us scars. One where he says a captain stabbed him with a stingray tail. So that was deep. And another where his head was cracked with an iron pipe, a wound closed with 22 stitches by a fellow crewman. Does he know what happened to his friend who helped treat him with the injury?
He felt like he was hopeless, and he was not being treated well by the Thai captain and supervisor. So finally, he killed himself by drinking something, and then I saw the body was thrown into the water.
Like many enslaved fishermen, Meng was smuggled into Thailand by crooked brokers who promised him a good job in a factory.
Instead of rolling up to the factory, they roll into a fishing port. You know, the guy gets out and he's in a warehouse. Some young toughs come and control him. They lock him somewhere and he's done for. That's it. Next day, 2 days later, he's presented to a fishing boat. The fishing captain looks him over, offers a price, buys him, and he's on the boat.
Buys him.
Buys him.
He buys the guy.
He buys the guy.
So one of the things I want to tell you is that Ming Mang was younger when that started happening to him. But the second thing that I want to tell you is that based on our own consumer habits, we could be guilty of buying fish that is not what we think it is. So, you know, some people ask, well, you know, why did you guys put this in your deck? We put it in there because we have to be responsible consumers. So I'm going to show you a can of tuna. I have to try to get this right. So this is a can of tuna, y'all. I know y'all know where I bought this from. This came from Walmart. And the reason why I show this is because I know because of the label that says certified sustainable seafood, that when I open this can, it is going to be tuna in there. But based on our own demand as a consumer, the people who are in these countries who are, you know, working to reduce their own costs, oftentimes they will put in this can something that is not what we want to eat. And because we don't know any better, you know, we don't do better. But what I want to show you also is that that's also with your fresh fish. So sometimes when you buy fish, you may not be getting what you want to, you know, what you want to eat. This is salmon. I bought it at Sam's. But what you see here is that this is a certified sustainable seafood. So that lets me know that I'm eating salmon, not something else. And the only reason why I call real special attention to this is about 3 years ago, I was getting ready to make some salmon patties. Anybody who knows salmon patties knows that you have to put the egg and the onions and the seasoning and everything in it. And it's going to pat up and you can fry it. I'm getting hungry. But you can fry it and it is a salmon patty. But listen, this can of salmon that I purchased, it never would fry up. I put a second egg in, it still wouldn't fry up. But you know why? Because these folk will dye white fish to make it look like salmon that we want to eat. And we're consuming it not knowing that it's not what, you know, we want it to be. So we tell you this so that you can be aware. This begins you changing your consumer habits. So now let's talk about the beauty industry. I don't know how many folk on here get your nails done, but I just want to let you know that this is another area where there is an element of human trafficking happening. The nail industry and the hair industry. So let's just take a listen to this lady tell us about this.
Nail salons are in a unique position because on one hand, they may be servicing a victim of human trafficking, and on the other hand, they may hire a victim of human trafficking. Some of the red flags of human trafficking that people can look out for include malnourishment, a subject that appears under the influence of alcohol or drugs, somebody that appears to have somebody always around them, monitoring them, possibly injuries, burns, brands, scarring, tattoos that indicate that they're property of somebody else, somebody that's afraid to make eye contact or speak for themselves, often deferring to other people. Victims of human trafficking can exhibit one or more of the signs. So if you see something, say something. The same sort of training that's being done for stylists to identify victims of domestic violence can also be done to help identify victims of human trafficking. There are many things you can do if you suspect that human trafficking is occurring. This includes calling 911 if there's an emergency occurring. Otherwise, call your local non-emergency law enforcement number. Additionally, you should follow your company protocol. But above all, you should call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. I encourage everyone to help us end human trafficking by spreading the word and raising awareness about this important topic.
So I want to go a little bit further and tell you that this is a $7.5 billion business around the nail industry. But the thing about the nail industry that I want to alert you to is that when you see the please tip and cash jar at the front of a nail salon, that's when you need to be concerned that there is someone who is working there under something called debt bondage, DEBT bondage. Debt bondage means that that salon owner has hired a trafficker to bring those people in to work, and he pays for them. And it's not until they pay off their debt that they're able to earn any money. So when you see the please tip in cash jar, you want to be concerned about that. With the hair braiding salons, it's actually the African hair braiding salons the majority of the time. What you will find is that traffickers have been paid to go to West Africa, and what they do is they bring back young girls who think that they are coming here to get a better education. So it's not smuggling then, because their parents give them permission. They come willingly, but they are coming thinking that they're going to get a better education. That's not what that happens, because they have that skill. They are put in these in these hair braiding salons, and they are braiding hair for 12 to 14 hours a day. Now, I don't want you guys to get it twisted. It's not all of the African hair braiding salons, but once again, there's an element of that happening. And the only way that we can stop that is by making people aware of, what's happening in those industries. The next industry that I want to talk about, I'm not going to play this video, but I do want to tell you that this is another industry. We love our chocolate. This is a $70 billion industry where kids are, number one, they're not being educated. Number two, they're working around hazardous tools. So you see this little fella here, he can't be any more than 9 or 10 years old, but in his hand, he has something that he could damage himself, or he could, hurt someone else with this knife as sharp as it is. 17 years ago, industries like the chocolate, Hershey's, Cargill, Nestle's, they all said that they were going to stop using kids to harvest their cocoa beans. And y'all, I'm here to tell you that that has not occurred. This is still happening, but we need to be aware of this happening in these industries. And when you see something that says, support this because it's going to divest funds out of that, then that's when we sign our names to say we support whatever you're doing so that these kids won't have to work in these types of conditions. I just learned this last year about cobalt, but it's something that runs our cell phones and yes, the computers that we are on. Exactly. But this is an unregulated, unmonitored area where kids are working. When I was looking for a video to put in this deck, I saw kids as young as 4 years old working to make sure that, we got our cobalt. But y'all, the other thing that I want to point out is that, remember I told you hazardous working conditions, and I also told you girls. So here in front of you, you see 2 girls working in the cobalt industry. But let's take a listen to cobalt.
This is one of the thousands of unregulated, unmonitored mines in the DRC. It's crawling with children, working like modern-day slaves. A 12-hour-long day of punishing work may earn them the equivalent of £1. Although one of the poorest countries on earth, DRC is rich in minerals. But a history of brutal colonial exploitation looks like being repeated now in 2017. Much of it's mined by hand with rudimentary tools in harsh, potentially hazardous conditions. Wretched whether or not, the rush is on for a mineral that DRC has in great abundance, cobalt, and it's fast becoming more precious than gold. It's a critical ingredient in lithium-ion batteries which power smartphones and laptops.
So I'm going to stop that there because I just want to make you aware of these kids that are still working in these mines. But I don't want us to get stuck on, the fact of what's happening in other places across the waters. I want us to also think about what's happening here in these United States. So last year, Wendy's was fined $400,000 for violating child labor laws. And then Chipotle's Mexican Grill it was also fined $1.4 million for violating child labor laws. So this is just to let you know that this is happening here in the States. Now, I have had more information since I've been doing this about what happens on the West Coast, what happens up in the West as far as kids who are working in tobacco fields. You have kids who are working in sweatshops. All of that amounts to child labor. And this is the things that, you know, we have to bring to your attention. In Georgia, we have chicken farms. So we have kids who are working illegally on the chicken farms. But I didn't want us to get stuck on what's happening in other countries and not think about what's happening here in our country. The labor trafficking, see something is we want you to know that victims can be any gender. They can be children, they can be adults, they can be US citizens, and they can be foreign nationals. And these are some of the, you know, the things that you want to be alerted to. If you see these things, we definitely want you to say something. Listen, we don't want you to call the local police on these instances. They have their hands full with so much other, you know, so many other things going on in our communities. But where you find labor trafficking, this is the line that you would call to give a tip. When you give that tip, what we want you to do is take a reporting number. They can give you a number, and we want you to call back and make sure that other people are also reporting the same instance around labor trafficking. This is your call to action. This is your to-do around labor trafficking. What's your own to do around labor trafficking? You can do something. You can become aware of your own consumer habits. So based on what you do as a consumer every day, we want you to visit this website, www.slaveryfootprint.org. And there you will find out how many people are depending on you, how many forced laborers are depending on you. How many of them, based on what you do every day, are depending on you? The other thing that we want you to do is you can download the FEP's chocolate list and check chocolate before buying, or you can visit the Food Empowerment Project and find out how you can begin to purchase things that will create a more sustainable world. We have to recognize the power we have in our food choices. You know, I told you earlier about the salmon and the tuna, you know, the fish, but also around your coffee that you drink. I'm a coffee connoisseur, but y'all, I had to change my coffee because I wanted to drink fair trade certified coffee. I wanted to make sure that when I, you know, when I was partaking in my coffee, that it was coffee that they had not used kids to harvest the cocoa beans. So that's another thing. So, you know, it may be that you have to pay a little more money sometimes, but I shop a lot at Aldi's. You can look for the same things at Walmart. It's just that you're going to have to look for those signs. The other places are like the I'm thinking, I'm drawing a blank, but I'll come back to it because I know that there are other places that you can shop. Trader Joe's, Whole Foods. Those are places where they are intentional about what they are selling in their stores and not being a part of slave labor. So now, this is not to scare anyone from being a donor. I'm a donor. But what we do want you to know that there's an element of organ trafficking happening in our communities. And organ trafficking involves organs that are, you know, that they steal and then they sell them on the black market. But what you need to hear about the most important organs that people are stealing from folk.
The world is desperate for organs. If you need a new kidney in the US, you only have a 1 in 3 chance of acquiring it by legal means. People are prepared to pay a lot of money to save their own or a loved one's life. So an international black market of organ procurement, trafficking and surgery exists. There's a huge demand, a major supply problem, and you're just a wet sack of commodities. It's illegal to sell human organs in most of the world. Nearly every country runs on a donation system. You sign up to become a donor, and in the unlikely event that you die in a healthy, clean, salvageable way, your organs can be transplanted into others. One person could potentially save 8 lives and improve up to 50. But there aren't enough donors to meet demand. Half of all people will die on the waiting list. This desperation drives people to the black market, an international industry that exists to supply wealthy patients with new organs, no questions asked. The black market accounts for 10% of all global transplants. However unsavory, the sale of human body parts is big business. Lungs and livers are as susceptible to market forces as coffee and cocaine. A new kidney on the black market will cost you $100,000 to $200,000. This is significantly cheaper than a legal operation, but price will still depend on the location of the transplant and nationality of the donor. Well, vendor. The word donor implies consent. A new heart will cost around $120,000, but be prepared to pay 3 times that for the transplant. A new pancreas, $125,000. The liver is special. You only need to transplant part of the liver and it will regrow. So depending on how much you want, it will cost you between $10,000 and $150,000. A lung is between $150,000 to $290,000, but most people will need 2, and they have to be the right size. These are the big 5, the life-threatening organs that are difficult to get hold of legally.
I know that is disgusting, but the fact of the matter is that this is happening in our communities. You know, people are most vulnerable when people die. They can take these body parts, whether you are alive or dead. So this is something that we tell people about to make you aware of it. Dr. Oz did a special 2 years ago now with a woman whose husband was called the Body Snatcher. He was a dentist by trade, but his side hustle was stealing tissues and bones that he kept in his freezer at his house in the garage. So y'all, that was in the United States. That wasn't somewhere else. So I just want to let you know that this is happening and to definitely be aware of this in your community. Now, we've gotten to the part where people, you know, come forward, the sex trafficking, learn something, see something, do something. Around sex trafficking, we once again lend our voice to our kids under the age of 18. And what we've heard them say is that, you know, in many cases, when they have been exploited, they had no idea. Take a listen.
I didn't know that my boyfriend wanted me to have sex with his friends. I didn't know when I was communicating with that man online, I would be in a safe place. I didn't know that all the money and gifts he gave meant he wanted to have sex.
I didn't know boys could be victims too.
I didn't know how bad things could get when I closed down my college and I didn't have anywhere else to go. I thought he cared for me. I didn't know he would drag me across the country just to traffic me. I didn't know he was actually hormonal. He was trying to run in the face. I didn't know that I was at risk. I didn't know that it could happen to me. I didn't realize that I was at risk. I thought he cared about me. I didn't know he was isolating me from my friends. I didn't know how bad things could get when I ran away. I didn't know all the gifts and money he gave me meant he wanted sex. I didn't know young people could be abusers. I didn't know it could happen to me.
And so that's the reality of these kids who are exploited. So, you know that anyone under the age of 18 cannot be arrested with child pornography as being child prostitutes. But what we're saying is that what we have found is that when these kids run away, they leave home or they go missing, what typically happens is that they're being exploited for sexual acts, and what they provide, the exploiter or the trafficker, or the predator will provide drugs, food, shelter, protection. Normally, they don't get a lot of money, so that's not what happens. But when a kid is out on the streets and they're looking for a place, you know, to be, this is what the trafficker or the predator will provide for them. And a lot of times these kids have no idea that when they're taking those explicit pictures, you know, knowingly or unknowingly, that they are being used on the dark web. So that's the thing that we've heard from, you know, police officers, sheriff's departments, that a lot of times kids' images are winding up in these spaces without their knowledge. Listen, sometimes people come to this training and they want to know about the numbers. And so we have built in talking about, you know, family members who are involved in child trafficking cases. And in many instances, it's high numbers around family and relatives who are involved in trafficking their own, you know, relatives. And then kids who don't know that they're dating someone who is going to, you know, take them into the life, as well as friends, like their classmates, like they said. You know, a lot of this is happening in our schools. And because they don't have the knowledge about that, they fall prey to traffickers who are in classrooms with them. And the way that they stay in this, because people will say, well, why didn't they run, or why didn't they get out? Well, here you have it. A lot of this is psychological. Some of it is physical. The other part of it is when, you know, girls think that they have a boyfriend and he is their trafficker. And then the substances is another piece that, you know, we talk about. And we don't dump on our child protection agencies, but we do make you aware that in the state of Georgia, there is a problem around our kids in foster care and them disappearing under the care of the state. So in Georgia, here are our most vulnerable youth. I'm sure that an agency in Dallas could tell you who your most vulnerable are, but it may mirror what you see here. That the African American community is one that you'll find that, you know, there's a high number around that. And then the homeless youth, there's a high number. The white victims, as well as child welfare involvement, those numbers are really high. And Georgia Cares is our contributor around those numbers. The other thing is that people don't realize that boys are trafficked too. This is a huge issue with boys. It just shows up differently. The way that traffickers and predators groom boys is different. The way that they exploit them is different, but it does happen to boys. And our numbers and the information we have around boys is skewed because boys don't want to talk about this. They're not going to give that information. So that's another area that, you know, we lack information around boys. People ask us, what happened at the point of the pandemic? You know, what happened with our kids? So here you have the statistics, national statistics, not just Georgia statistics. National statistics around our missing and exploited children, those numbers going up 1 million. Polaris, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, told us that, you know, not just kids were without housing, there were families looking for shelter. And with that comes, you know, an element of trafficking. And then the National Abuse Hotline gave us numbers about kids under the age 18 calling them looking for help, which meant that a lot of these kids were living in homes or living in situations with their trafficker, with their predator, with their exploiter. And then we tell parents, because we have a parent training, but we do tell you that these are some of the ways that these predators and traffickers are contacting kids online. So I don't know if you saw it, but during the pandemic, there were tons of intergenerational TikToks. I mean, I had never seen so many, but these are places where kids are being contacted online, and groomers are waiting on them to go back to school so they can continue these conversations outside of the home. How many of you guys knew that kids could have 2 calculators on their phone? Kids can have 2 calculators. One calculator is where they're actually doing their work. The second calculator is where they are talking to predators and traffickers. It's a secret app. So parents, if you have kids who are teenagers, this is something you need to do, is scroll. In our parent, training, we talk more about this, but we want you to know that on apps and on games, kids are being contacted by predators. And y'all, the thing with these kids and pornography, it is totally out of control. Kids have unrestricted access to technology, including these games and apps, but on those sites is also an opportunity for them to delve down into pornography. Like, 40% of these kids have the pornography on their phones. 50% are streaming it, downloading it to their computers. So we have a problem with pornography, and we know that pornography affects the brain, the heart, and of course, is going to affect the world. So we just talk to parents about talking to their kids and having these conversations. In Georgia, we have a sexting law. I'm not sure if you have one in Texas, but I would like for you all to look it up and see if you have a sexting law. So in Georgia, our sexting law says that if a kid is between the ages of 14 and 17, and they are creating or possessing nude and sexually explicit images of him or herself, then they are guilty of a misdemeanor. So if they are between the ages of 17 and 18 or 18 and older, and they have these images, this is called child pornography. So that's a felony. They can go to prison. So a lot of times parents don't even know this. And then when things happen at these schools and kids get caught with these images, everyone is looking at everyone else. But this is a conversation parents and educators need to have. So now we talk about sex trafficking. I am going to skip this video about know the signs because I've talked about the signs already, but I do want to get to talking about the predator once again, because we have to hold predators and traffickers accountable for what they're doing in our communities. Normally, if they're caught, they get to pay their way out of situations. They don't get arrested. They don't get prosecuted. They go back home to their families and until the next time that they do something. So what we're saying is that people need to understand that there are laws out there, and we definitely need to hold them accountable for what they're doing. Take a listen to some people talk about predators.
We have an individual who's pled guilty now. He's looking at a 15-year mandatory minimum. And I've heard from several people who said that's way too long for someone trying to, just trying to buy sex with a child. Well, with Mr. Gravens during his online chats, he said, I see you have a 12-year-old. I really want a 10-year-old, but I'll take the 12-year-old if I don't have to use condoms and I can take pictures. Before people judge and say, you're being harsh on these guys, you should see what we see.
I was just sick, but it told me this. We have to dig in and fight.
I really believe that most buyers felt like they weren't going to get caught, and I think also that if they did get caught, nothing was going to happen to them.
Shared Hope conducted a study in 2014 of buyers, and we found that 26% of the buyers of commercial sex with kids did not spend a day in jail. We've got a serious problem of tolerance.
My own ignorance was my biggest barrier. And it wasn't until I became a member of the Governor's Council, it wasn't until I went to the Shared Hope Conference that I understood that even in our own community, we probably have a problem.
Juvenile sex trafficking is recruiting, enticing, harboring, transporting, obtaining, maintaining a minor for commercial sex. Some states are now starting to include purchasing and soliciting. That's to clarify that buyers are part of the crime of sex trafficking.
We think that there are two types of buyers who end up in situations where they're caught for trying to buy a minor. One, we think, is they just want to buy sex and they don't care if she's 17 or she's 18. And then there are people who are specifically looking for a minor.
Who are getting buyers that are doctors, attorneys, law enforcement, people that make a substantial amount of money, to the guy that just came off the construction site.
My experience was that it was the stereotype that we always hear about, that they have families, that they have careers.
So we've had a physician, we've had an air traffic controller.
Older, younger, married, not married.
The age range of our offenders went from age 17 up to around 60, almost 70 years old.
The only really consistent trend we've seen is that they're males.
A disturbing trend that we found was that the younger the victim, the more money that was offered to have sex with that child.
Some of the buyer cases we've done, we absolutely have found evidence. They've brought tape, guns, zip ties, things along those lines.
There were several times that I was raped in a car and shoved out of a car.
They feel much more comfortable shopping on the internet. They can do it from their workplace. They can do it from their home. There's a large number of men out there that are looking for these girls, knowing that they can abuse them, rob them, rape them, and they're going to get away with it, and they're going to go on to their next victim.
And so I'll stop here because we're at a point where I think we're supposed to have final words by Ms. Jackson. The thing is that I just want to tell you that there's a lot more happening in our communities, but in Atlanta, and this is something that I don't tell kids, the average trafficker earns $32,000 a week. $32,000 a week. And you understand why I don't tell our kids is because I don't want them thinking that, you know, exploiting people is a way to make a living. But this is the reality of human trafficking. So I want to stop now just in case there are any questions. Ms. Jackson, if you have any questions, if anyone has any questions, I can definitely send a frequently asked question. I can always come back for another, session if you'd like. But I just wanted to, stop it so that I could just, say thank you to you all for having me in this space. I do want to tell you that there's some things happening on our college campuses, on high school campuses that I want you to be aware of, and it's called sugaring. So I want you guys to know about that as well. And the website OnlyFans, that's another thing that's happening around human trafficking. So definitely appreciate the ask. Coyote, thank you so much for having me. And I will stop now.
Well, it is hard for this to end because I could sit and not only listen, but learn from you for hours and hours more. I am telling you, there are things that have blown my mind. When you saw me looking to the side, it's because I'm doing the slaveryfootprint.org and I'm reading and learning about the food that I eat. I am a meat eater, and honey, I'm looking at this like, oh, that response or consumerism is something that a friend of mine spoke with me about. And I thought, well, I don't really buy, there's a certain brand of shoes that has a long running history of using child labor and those things. And so I'm like, oh, I'm on top of it. I know. No, I did not know. And so I thank you for helping expose me to more information. And I'm almost looking funny about the face because I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna eat. Now I started me a little garden during COVID, but I don't think I'm growing enough stuff to be able to survive.
No, listen, I have been looking for a pair of tennis shoes made in the States without breaking the bank forever. But it's very hard to be a consumer and not, definitely buy into it. But yeah, so it's and, I tell people it's not something that you can change overnight. You have to work on it.
And I will begin working on it. And you've allowed me to see my role in all of this because as a consumer, I drive demand. And so I may not be in the market for a child as some of these people who have been arrested, but if I'm in the market for a particular shoe or a particular something, I have to understand that there are things that happen along the way that if I knew about them, I would not approve of them. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to pay attention, to be aware and to learn. I'm telling y'all, slaveryfootprint.org is opening my eyes, And Miss Marshall, I truly appreciate the fact that you are conversational in tone, knowledgeable, friendly, cheerful, and you didn't make it feel heavy, but you wanted us to be aware, and I appreciate that. And I heard you say that you are open to coming back for future events. That's recorded, so you can't deny it. Because you also have a wonderful training for parents. And so around back to school time, I'm sure you're very busy. I'm hoping that we can work to get on your list around that time as well. And I really do appreciate the resources that you're offering to share with us. It has been a wonderful time. I am so sad to see this hour pass, but I thank you sincerely for what you've done. And I look forward to working with you in the future. I have your email. You will get an email from me very, very shortly before the sun sets on this day.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I appreciate it. I appreciated it. So I know we're right at 1 o'clock. Did anyone have any questions? I don't like to leave. I didn't check the chat box, but I don't like to. Was it just the 4 of us?
Well, the participants are in a different space. And so Hawote would have to let us know if there were questions that you wanted to review and address. Hawote, were there questions that were placed in the chat box?
No, I don't see any questions at this time.
Okay. So that's seldom what that's often what we have happen. Either there it's like a ton of questions, or either people are sitting there with their mouths wide open and they have nothing to say to me.
I'm sure we fall into the latter category because it truly is shocking. It really, really is. And it was also important to note, I actually do have a question for you if I can.
Sure.
If I go into a nail shop and I see the tip jar at the front, typically I try to tip the individual. But if I see that tip jar at the front, am I supposed to tip there? Is that something that's good for the person? Because that means that it gets them closer to earning money for themselves. Is it bad? So talk me through that, please.
So the thing that we, the encouragement that we give community is to definitely be aware of the tip jar if you see it. Now, personally, what I have done is not patronize those spaces because I know that human trafficking is happening there. So I'll find another space. I have actually stopped because there's so much unknown around this now with these people being trafficked in. That I've just, steered myself away to other, nationalities who don't have that in their salon. So that would be the one thing that I would say about it. The other thing is that because there is that, although like in Texas, in Austin, in fact, recently, before the pandemic, and they were closing in on those nail salons. So they know that it's happening. And Austin was one of those places that they were like, okay, we're going to shut this down because we know that it's happening. But no one else is as responsive as Austin had been around making some laws around it and going in and investigating. So because there are not enough investigators, this is something that's going to take a while to do. So it's incumbent upon the consumer to make his or her changes as far as what you're going to do around it. So that money that you give, Ms. Jackson, it is actually going to be given to those people who are working under debt bondage. But if it's more than one in that space, they're going to split that money. It's not like that one person is going to get, one person is going to get all of that money. So because we don't have the intricacies or the insight into what they're doing in the salon, what that owner is doing, I just say stay away from those that you see the please tip and cash jar.
Okay, well, certainly now that I understand that tip jar at the front is a potential sign of human trafficking. If I see that means I get to do an about face. I may end up having to polish my own little toes at the house for a while. We did it during the pandemic. We just had stuff opened up. So
Right. So are you saying that the one that you patronize, they actually do have a please tip in cash?
no, I don't have a standard salon anymore.
Okay.
The one I like went out of business. And so I was looking for a new salon before
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah.
And then after everything got shut down,
Yeah. So we have to be so particular now, but I would definitely, take a walk around it and see. It's just so much around those nails and African hair braiding salons for us to be alerted to. Yeah. I mean,
And
I've
when
had
you said, oh, I'm sorry. When you said if there's a massage parlor that's open 24 hours, that means something. It, it is odd that I need a massage at 3 in the morning. So that's one of those things where if you think about it, it
Right.
does make sense that it's
Right.
probably something you need to
Right.
avoid.
Yeah, and that's something that the community can definitely put a halt to, because they can begin to call in if there's a massage parlor in their community and it is flashing a 24-hour a day sign. That's an obvious to do. Like, it's time to shut them down. Those hours are, those are hours where that there's something happening there.
Yes, ma'am. Now, I'm gonna say one last thing and I'm gonna let you go because I promise I'm not gonna keep you all day. I could, but I won't. The thing that I absolutely loved is where you mentioned that there's stylist training to help them identify human trafficking victims, because you were correct. We do work with stylists, hotel employees. That was one of the things that the Texas legislature recently passed. All hotel employees will be required to have training to spot human trafficking victims. And it didn't occur to me that we could do similar things with stylists. There's a network here in Dallas where restaurant owners and restaurant associations, restaurant and bars, they've conducted training so that they can help identify victims and help them become survivors, like to help them get out. But it didn't occur that stylists are also in a critical position to be able to spot some of these things. So I thank you for that recommendation. And that is something that will very quickly be added to some applications and to some work plans of what we're planning to do here in the Dallas area.
One more that I will suggest, if it has not been added already, would be the hospitals and the emergency clinics. Because we have had survivors tell us that they have been seen in the hospital on numerous occasions, but no one was alerted to the fact that they were being trafficked. So if you all decide to do something around that area, then I could definitely lend some conversation about how to go about implementing some plans for them as to things that they could look for, especially those small little clinics in in our communities.
Okay. Because I know we have a local nonprofit that works with our major county hospital system here in the Dallas area, but I don't believe they have training that hits those smaller neighborhood clinics that are dispersed around town. So that's also a wonderful idea and something else for me to get in touch with you about a little later on. See, you made the mistake. You're gonna be like, oh Lord, that's Latoya emailing me again. That's all right. That's all right. I certainly thank you, Ms. Marshall.
Thank you, guys.
It was so wonderful to make time and for you to take time to talk with us and train with us today. I so appreciate the knowledge that you shared and the information you've been able to give us. I so appreciate you. And I know that our audience appreciated you as well. Thank you so very much. I sincerely hope you have a wonderful day. And I thank you because you're making a difference, not just in Atlanta, not just in Georgia, but we sure appreciate you for remembering those of us here in Texas, here in Dallas, Texas, and helping us as well. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, darling. I appreciate you guys. Can you get a screenshot? Because I always like to post these on my LinkedIn. Hi, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it, Hayo?
I'm trying to get it.
Let's see. Do I have to do my camera thing, my phone thing?
Give me 1 second. I'll count us down.
Let me see here.
All right. Y'all ready?
Yep.
Smile and okay, you look great. I look not so great, but that's all right. We got the picture.
You look awesome.
You know, right? What is she talking about? All right, y'all. We're gonna have a fabulous weekend because it's coming.
Yes, thank goodness.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Take
Well
care.
done.
I'm gonna
Thank
email
you.
you the screenshot.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
I'm trying to get out of here.